Today we are getting into something that I think everyone listening is going to relate to on a deeply uncomfortable level. We're talking about the power of no and, setting healthy boundaries.
Yeah, this is a heavy one, but it is so, so necessary.
It really is. And the sources we're looking at today, this collection of psychological research and clinical notes, they really frame this mission we have today. We want to help you figure out why saying yes when you desperately want to say no is just like completely destroying your energy.
Right. And it's not just about the psychology. The material actually gives us the precise, linguistic tools to take that power back without all the guilt.
Exactly. But before we get into the tools, I want to start with this scenario from the text because it's too real. Okay, so picture this. It's 5:25 p.m.
Oh, the danger zone.
Right. You are sitting at your desk and you are staring blankly at a blinking cursor. Your brain is entirely fogged over.
You're completely done for the day.
Totally done. Your lower back has that dull, familiar ache from sitting in a cheap ergonomic chair for like 9 hours. And you are operating on maybe 2% battery.
If that, yeah.
Yeah. The only coherent thought circulating in your mind is the specific glorious sequence of unlocking your front door, putting on sweatpants, and just collapsing onto the couch. You are utterly depleted.
And, behavioral psychologists actually have a term for this. You are in a state of cognitive and physical exhaustion.
Right.
Your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain responsible for complex decision-making, has essentially packed up and gone home for the day.
It's already on the couch.
Exactly. It's offline.
So you're just trying to run out the clock for those last 5 minutes. But then a shadow falls over your desk.
Oh, no.
A colleague walks up, they look panicked, they're clutching a laptop, and they say, "Hey, I'm so sorry, but we have a massive crisis with the Q3 presentation. Could you stay and help me format these slides tonight?"
And this is where it all goes wrong.
Right, because in that fraction of a second, your body knows the answer is no. Your exhaustion dictates the answer is no.
Yeah.
But before your conscious mind can even process the request, you force this completely hollow smile. You hear your own voice pitch up an octave and you say, "Yes, of course, I can totally help."
It is entirely reflexive. And what is so deeply unsettling about that specific moment, that split second where the yes just falls out of your mouth, is that it bypasses your logical brain entirely.
It's like you didn't even have a choice.
You really didn't. You didn't evaluate the request. You didn't check your internal battery levels. Your autonomic nervous system took over and essentially spoke for you.
And the aftermath of that reflex is brutally predictable. The source text captures this perfectly. Because, you stay, you do the formatting.
You always do.
Right,
Yeah.
and you finally leave the office at 8 p.m.
Yeah.
But as you're sitting in your car or riding the train home, you don't feel this warm, glowing pride of being a team player.
Not at all.
You feel this crushing, overwhelming mixture of regret, profound exhaustion, and the text calls it an almost physical hollowness in your chest.
That hollowness is key. It's the body's alarm bell. It is somatic feedback. We tend to view that train ride home as just, the lingering effects of a long workday.
Right, like we just worked hard.
But if we look at the psychological mechanics outlined in our research today, that specific flavor of emotional depletion is much more insidious. You aren't just tired from doing extra work.
So what is it then?
You are spiritually exhausted because you just committed an act of self-betrayal.
Oh, wow. An act of self-betrayal.
Yeah, you knew exactly what your physical and mental needs were in that moment, and you actively chose to abandon them to manage someone else's anxiety.
That is incredibly heavy. But sitting here thinking about it, it feels devastatingly accurate. And that is exactly what we are tearing apart today in this deep dive.
We really have to deconstruct this.
We do. We are looking at this extensive collection of psychological research, clinical observations, and linguistic strategies focused on the architecture of healthy boundaries.
And the linguistic aspect is particularly fascinating here.
Oh, totally. Because language is the interface where our internal boundaries meet external reality. The way we structure our refusals literally alters the social dynamics of the room.
But before we can fix the language, we really have to understand the underlying pathology.
Yeah.
Right? We have to look at why that reflex to say yes is so overwhelmingly powerful.
Let's get into that, because the sources paint a very stark picture of what a people pleaser actually is. And I think we need to clear the air right away here.
Yeah, there's a big misconception.
Exactly. The literature makes a very sharp distinction between being a genuinely generous person and being a chronic people pleaser.
Absolutely. Generosity requires agency. If you have an abundance of energy, time, and desire, and you choose to give it to someone else, that is a generous act.
Right, because you want to.
Yes. You are operating from a place of surplus. People-pleasing, however, is a compulsion. It is the absolute inability to tolerate the discomfort of another person's disappointment.
Oh.
You are not giving from a surplus. You are giving from a deficit.
Yeah.
You are essentially setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm.
Setting yourself on fire. That is such a vivid image. So why do we do it? If it leaves us exhausted and hollowed out, what is the evolutionary or psychological payoff?
The text breaks us down into 3 core drivers. The root fears that force that reflexive yes.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first one is the fear of being disliked, which seems obvious on the surface, but the research suggests it goes way, way deeper than just wanting to be popular in the office.
Right, it's not just about getting invited to happy hour.
Exactly. It goes down to our evolutionary biology. For early humans, social isolation wasn't just emotionally painful, it was a literal death sentence.
Because you needed the tribe to survive.
Right. If the tribe disliked you, if you were deemed unhelpful or a burden, you were exiled. And exile meant you would be eaten by a predator or starve.
So our brains evolved to view social disapproval not as a minor inconvenience, but as an existential threat.
Spot on. When your colleague asks you to stay late, your amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, doesn't see a mere request for PowerPoint help.
What does it see?
It perceives a threat to your social standing. Your subconscious calculates, if I say no, they will think I am lazy, I will lose my utility to the group, and I will be abandoned.
That explains the physical panic. When someone asks me for a favor I don't want to do, I literally feel a spike of adrenaline in my chest.
Your heart rate goes up.
Which leads right into the second core driver the text identifies, the fear of conflict.
Now, this is where it gets into trauma responses. In modern psychology, we talk about the nervous system's response to a threat: fight, flight, freeze.
Right, we've all heard of those.
But there's a fourth one, which is highly relevant here, and that is fawn.
Fawning. Let's unpack that, because I don't think everyone listening is familiar with that term in this specific context.
So fawning is a trauma response, where a person seeks safety by aggressively accommodating the perceived threat.
Like trying to appease them.
Exactly. You merge your desires with the demands of the other person to avoid any friction. For a chronic people pleaser, everyday social friction, like telling a coworker you can't help them, is perceived by the nervous system as a highly dangerous conflict.
I want to push back on that a little, or at least, play devil's advocate. Are we really saying that me agreeing to stay late and format some slides is a trauma response?
Yeah, that's a fair question.
Because that feels like pathologizing normal corporate life. Sometimes you just don't want an awkward conversation by the coffee machine tomorrow, right?
It's really a matter of scale and chronicity.
Yeah.
No, staying late one time isn't necessarily a trauma response, but the literature we are looking at is analyzing the pattern.
A pattern of always doing it.
Yes. If your default, uncontrollable reflex in every interpersonal interaction is to suppress your own needs to ensure the other person never experiences a negative emotion toward you, you are exhibiting a fawning behavior.
Oh, I see.
You are internalizing the conflict.
Yeah.
You avoid the external argument with your colleague, but the conflict doesn't magically vanish. It just moves inside. You absorb it. You become the battlefield.
You become the battlefield. That makes perfect sense. The war is still happening. It's just happening to your own nervous system.
Precisely.
And then there's the third driver, the craving for approval. The text describes this as an endless chase for external validation.
Because if your self-worth is entirely predicated on your utility to others, you need constant reassurance that you are still useful.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
It creates a behavioral loop very similar to addiction. You say yes, you get the dopamine hit of the person saying, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much, you're a lifesaver."
Right, you feel like a hero for about 5 seconds.
But that high dissipates incredibly quickly. By the time you get to your car, the high is gone, replaced by exhaustion, and your self-worth meter is back to zero. You need another hit. You need another favor to perform.
As I was going through the clinical notes on this, an analogy popped into my head. Tell me if this accurately maps to the psychology here.
Let's hear it.
It feels like being a people pleaser is essentially like living off a high-interest emotional credit card.
Oh, like that.
When you swipe the card, when you say yes to avoid conflict, you get the immediate short-term relief of the purchase, you avoid the awkwardness, you get the quick thank you.
Right, the instant gratification.
But the debt you accrue is massive, and the interest rate is punishing.
I think that is a highly accurate framework, particularly because of how interest compounds over time. Let's look at what actually constitutes that emotional debt.
Yeah, the sources give us specific vocabulary for this hidden cost.
They do. The true cost of a forced yes is the internal buildup of two very heavy, very destructive forces: chronic stress and deep-seated resentment.
Stress, we all understand. It's the cortisol, the migraines, the disrupted sleep from taking on way too much.
We're all familiar with that.
But let's really drill down into resentment, because the text isolates resentment as the most toxic byproduct of people-pleasing.
Resentment is a fascinating emotion because it is essentially unprocessed, stagnant anger. And what makes it so uniquely corrosive for the people-pleaser is its duality. It is directed outward and inward simultaneously.
I know exactly what you mean. You're sitting there at 7:30 p.m. fixing the font on slide 42, and you are just seething at your colleague.
You're furious with them.
You're thinking, how dare they drop this on me at the last minute? They know I commute an hour. They were so incredibly selfish and inconsiderate. You build this entire narrative of their malice.
But here is the brutal reality the psychological literature forces us to confront. Your colleague isn't a mind reader. And they aren't necessarily malicious.
Right.
They have to question, and you, with a smile on your face, said, yes, I can totally help. You presented an entirely willing facade.
So they think everything is fine.
Exactly. So while you are projecting all this intense anger onto them, the deeper, heavier resentment is actually directed squarely at yourself.
Because deep down, you know you are the one who opened the door. You are mad at yourself for failing to protect your own time. You're sitting there thinking, why am I so weak? Why do I keep doing this to myself?
Precisely. It is a profound self-loathing. And that self-directed resentment is what truly bankrupts your energy.
It's not just the slide formatting.
No, you aren't just physically fatigued from the labor. You are carrying the weight of the work, the manufactured anger at your colleague, and the profound disappointment in your own lack of agency.
That is the compounding interest on your emotional credit card.
It literally degrades your psychological immune system over time.
Okay, so if the cost of saying yes is this unbelievably high, if it leads to physical burnout, fawning responses, and this toxic brew of resentment, why does the idea of protecting ourselves feel so fundamentally aggressive?
It's the phrasing.
Right, which brings us into the core paradigm shift of the source material, redefining what a boundary actually is.
The word boundary has a massive PR problem.
It really does.
For someone who has spent their life chronically accommodating others, the concept of a boundary sounds hostile.
It sounds like an act of war. When you tell a people pleaser they need to set a boundary, their brain immediately pictures a giant, impenetrable brick wall topped with barbed wire.
Like a fortress.
Exactly. They think it means locking themselves in, cutting off all emotional connection, and essentially telling the world to go to hell.
Which triggers that exact evolutionary fear of exile we talked about earlier. If I build a wall, I am isolating myself, and isolation equals death.
So your brain won't let you do it.
Right. But the source text offers a vital reframing here. It asks us to discard the brick wall entirely and instead visualize a garden fence.
The garden metaphor, I read this section like 3 times because it shifts the perspective so beautifully. The text asks you to imagine that your internal world, your time, your energy, your physical health, your peace of mind is a thriving, meticulously cultivated garden.
The soil is your daily capacity. The water is your attention. And the flowers growing inside are the things that actually matter to your core identity.
Like what?
That could be your creative pursuits, your time with your family, or, quite frankly, your absolute necessity to sit in silence for an hour after work just to regulate your nervous system.
Yes.
You have worked hard to cultivate this space.
Now, a healthy boundary is simply the wooden fence you build around that specific garden, and the text points out what a fence does and does not do.
This is the crucial part.
Right. A fence doesn't block out the sunlight. It doesn't stop the rain. It is not an opaque barrier. You can stand at the fence and have a perfectly pleasant conversation with your neighbor. You remain entirely connected to your community.
You are not isolated at all. But the sole critical function of that fence is to ensure that passersby do not carelessly trample your delicate grass and crush your flowers under their boots.
And the word carelessly is the linchpin here, because without a fence, without any visible demarcation of where your limits are, anyone can just wander right through.
They don't even know they're doing it.
And this was a huge realization for me reading the psychology behind this. The people trampling your garden are rarely evil villains trying to destroy your life.
They're just looking for the path of least resistance.
Exactly. That colleague who asked you to stay late, they aren't sitting at their desk twirling a mustache thinking, how can I ruin their evening?
No, they're just stressed out themselves.
They see an open field, your completely unfenced garden, and they decide to walk diagonally across it because it's a shortcut for their own anxiety. They don't even realize they are stepping on your rare orchids, which, in this scenario, is your fundamental need for rest.
This requires a massive shift in personal accountability. It is not the world's job to magically intuit where your garden ends.
That's a tough pill to swallow.
It is. The world will take what you offer. It is your job, and your job alone, to build the fence. If you leave the gate wide open and you put up a sign that says walk anywhere, you cannot be furious when someone wanders in and harvests your tomatoes.
Okay, I hear that, but I have to interject here because this is where the theoretical psychology hits the brick wall of reality. Let's be real for a second.
Let's do it.
If I tell my boss, the person who controls my paycheck and my healthcare, I can't stay late, he doesn't see a lovely, quaint little garden fence. He sees a closed door. He sees insubordination. How does visualizing a garden protect me from getting fired or missing a promotion?
That is a highly pragmatic and necessary challenge. We aren't suggesting that boundaries exist in a vacuum devoid of power dynamics.
But the real world has consequences.
But let's look at the alternative. If you never set a boundary with that boss, your garden will be stripped down to the bedrock. You will burn out.
Yeah, that's true.
Your work quality will plummet, your physical health will degrade, and you may end up losing the job anyway because you are no longer functioning optimally. Your boss, ultimately, needs your high-quality output. A burnt-out, resentful employee produces substandard work.
So the fence actually protects your ability to do the job well long-term.
Exactly. But to fully internalize this, we have to look at the mathematical reality of our energy. The research text poses a stark hypothetical that I think is just brilliant in its simplicity.
The battery analogy, right?
Yes. Imagine your personal energy, your daily capacity, is a literal battery. You start the day with exactly 100% charge. That is a finite biological law.
It's not unlimited.
No. You cannot hustle your way into 120%. You cannot manifest 150%.
I love how this strips away the toxic hustle culture myth that we just need to, grind harder. 100%, that's it.
So we have to look at the economy of that 100%. If you give 60% to the core demands of your job, and then a friend calls you in crisis and needs to vent for an hour, and you give them 20% because you want to be a good friend.
You are at 80%.
Then a neighbor asks you to walk their dog, there goes 10%. You are at 90%.
Yeah.
You still have to commute, you have to buy groceries, you have to shower.
You are mathematically bankrupt.
And what happens to the things that actually matter to you?
Yeah.
The text asks a piercing question here. Where is your actual priority?
It's a hard question to answer.
If you are indiscriminately giving away chunks of your finite 100% to every single external request, your priority is not your own life. Your priority is everyone else's convenience.
Which sets up what I think is the most profound psychological pivot in this entire deep dive. If you listening take nothing else away from this discussion, this is the concept to hold on to.
It really changes everything.
The source material states it clearly. Saying no to others means saying yes to yourself.
It completely inverts the emotional valence of the word no.
It changes everything. Because when you are trapped in that people-pleasing, fawning response, you view a refusal purely as a negative action directed at someone else.
You feel like you're attacking them.
Right. You think if I say no, I am hurting them, I am being withholding, I am a bad person. But this reframing forces you to look at the other side of the equation.
The side that includes you.
Exactly. When your colleague asks for your evening and you decline, you are not attacking them. You are actively saying yes to your own physical recovery. You are saying yes to your own peace of mind.
You are recognizing that your own well-being has intrinsic value. And that introduces a concept that is deeply uncomfortable for many people.
Which is?
Self-respect. Setting a boundary is not an act of malice. It is an act of fierce self-respect. It is the realization that your needs are not secondary to the arbitrary desires of the people around you.
I feel like sitting with that realization creates immense psychological dissonance at first. You know cognitively that you have the right to protect your energy, but your body is still screaming that you are being selfish.
That dissonance is very normal.
But once you practice it, the guilt starts to burn off. You realize that no isn't a weapon, it's just the fence.
But the dissonance you mentioned is exactly why this is so difficult. Understanding the theory of the garden fence is one thing.
Doing it is another.
Standing in an office with your heart pounding in your chest, your throat tightening, and actually articulating the word no to a demanding human being who is standing 2 feet away from you is an entirely different biological experience.
The throat tightening is so real. I literally feel a physical block in my vocal cords when I have to disappoint someone.
Your nervous system is fighting you.
Which is why the final section of our source material is so critical. We are moving from theory into the actual mechanical execution, the mechanics of the polite no.
This is where we get practical.
Right. The researchers and communication experts outline a specific refusal formula, and it all hinges on one deeply counterintuitive rule for people pleasers. Brevity equals power.
This is where we have to look closely at the linguistic architecture of boundary setting. Because the biggest, most fatal mistake a people pleaser makes when trying to finally say no is that they over-explain.
Oh, yeah.
They drown the boundary in a sea of justification.
Oh, the word vomit. I am painfully guilty of this. If someone asks me to do something on a Saturday, I don't just say no. I launch into a monologue.
You give them the whole itinerary.
Totally. I'll be like, oh my gosh, I am so incredibly sorry. I really wish I could, but my dog has been acting weird and I might need to take him to the vet. And also I'm waiting for the plumber between 10 and 2 and my mom said she might call and I just have this headache coming on.
Let's dissect exactly what is happening psychologically when you do that. When you offer a litany of specific excuses, you think you are softening the blow.
I do. I think I'm being nice.
You think you're proving to the other person that your refusal is geographically and temporally justified. But subtextually, what you're actually doing is asking for their permission to decline.
Whoa. Asking for permission.
Yes. You are laying all your evidence out on the table, like a lawyer presenting a case to a judge, and you are hoping they will look at your sick dog and your plumber and say, I rule in your favor. Your excuses are valid. You are excused.
That is wow.
You are taking all of your autonomy and handing it directly back to them.
That is terrifyingly accurate. I never thought about it like that.
Furthermore, from a purely strategic standpoint, providing detailed reasons invites negotiation. You are giving the other person data points to argue with.
Oh, I see where this is going.
If you say, I can't stay late because I have to feed my dog, a persistent colleague will immediately look for a workaround.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, can your neighbor feed the dog? Can you run home, feed him, and log back on at 8 p.m.?
You gave them a puzzle to solve instead of a boundary to respect. You turned a closed door into a negotiation table.
Precisely. If you give a reason, you give them a problem to solve. And if they solve it, your boundary collapses.
So what's the alternative?
That is why the refusal formula absolutely demands brevity. You do not owe the world a sworn affidavit regarding how you spend your finite energy. Let's look at the specific engineered English phrases provided in the clinical text.
Let's do it.
They seem incredibly simple, almost too simple, but they are psychologically ironclad.
Let's break them down. The first phrase the text highlights is, I'd love to, but I can't.
I'd love to, but I can't. Let's analyze the syntax here. The first half, I'd love to, is highly functional. It serves to soothe the other person's ego.
It's the cushion.
Right. It validates them and their request. It communicates, I see you, I value our relationship, and the thing you are asking is not inherently offensive.
It de-escalates the perceived conflict. It removes the sting of rejection. It's not saying, I don't want to help you. It's saying, my desire is there.
But then comes the hard pivot. But I can't. And notice exactly what is missing from that sentence.
The word because.
Exactly. There is no because. It is a complete grammatical sentence that terminates precisely where it needs to.
It just ends.
Yes. It establishes a firm, immovable boundary without offering a single piece of specific data that can be debated. It is polite, it is warm, but it is a locked door.
It's so clean, but I can imagine the dead air after saying that is agonizing for a people pleaser. You say, but I can't, and then you just have to sit in the silence while they process it.
The silence is where the boundary is forged.
Yeah.
You have to tolerate the awkwardness of the pause. If you rush to fill the silence, you will start apologizing.
You'll undo the whole thing. Okay, let's look at the second phrase. I'm not able to commit to that right now. I really gravitated toward this one, especially for a professional environment.
This phrase is a masterclass in professional boundary setting. The key here is the specific use of the word commit.
Why that word specifically?
To commit to a project or a request means to dedicate your time, your focus, and your resources fully to ensuring its success. By stating, I am not able to commit, You are implicitly communicating that you take your responsibilities profoundly seriously.
Right. You are framing the refusal not as laziness, but as a high standard of quality control.
Exactly.
You're basically saying, I respect your project too much to give it partial effort, and because I lack the capacity right now, I must decline.
It speaks directly to capacity rather than capability. It is extraordinarily difficult for a manager or a colleague to argue with, I do not have the capacity to execute this to the standard it requires.
They can't really argue with that.
No, they can't. It frames your no as a mature professional judgment call rather than a personal slight.
That is such a powerful armor to wear in a corporate setting. All right, the third phrase from the text. Thank you for asking, but I have other plans. This one completely shifted my perspective.
Thank you for asking provides the requisite social grace.
Oh.
It acknowledges the inclusion. But I have other plans. The unassailable boundary.
Here is what I love about the phrase other plans, and I think a lot of people get tripped up by this.
How so?
As a recovering people pleaser, I always operated under the assumption that other plans had to mean a verifiable, socially acceptable event.
Like a reservation.
Exactly. I thought I needed a doctor's appointment, non-refundable theater tickets, or a wedding to attend. If I didn't have a calendar invite, I didn't have plans. But reading the psychological breakdown of this, I realized how absurd that is.
It is a fabricated rule. What constitutes a valid plan?
Exactly. The listener's plan could literally just be going home, taking off their shoes, laying on the living room rug, and staring at the ceiling fan for 45 minutes in complete silence.
And from a neurobiological perspective, staring at the ceiling to downregulate your overstimulated nervous system is an incredibly vital plan.
It's not doing nothing.
No, rest is a plan. Recovery is a plan. Protecting your cognitive battery is a plan.
And the beauty of this phrase is that it is a perfectly valid plan that requires zero justification. You do not have to look at your boss and say, I have other plans. My plan is to go home and lie on my rug.
They don't need to know that.
You simply leave it at other plans. You contain the information.
But as we noted earlier, the true test of these phrases isn't reading them off a page. It's delivering them when your nervous system is screaming at you to fawn and submit.
Yes, so we need to stress test this. We need to look at how this actually plays out in real time.
I think a role play is in order.
Let's do a role play. But I want to make it messy. I don't want the perfect, clean interaction. I want to take on the persona of a persistently manipulative colleague,
Bring it on.
the kind of person who weaponizes guilt and absolutely refuses to respect a boundary. And I want you to demonstrate how you hold the line, using these phrases, managing your tone, and refusing to hand over your power.
I welcome the challenge. Let's construct a fence under pressure.
Okay. Set the scene. It's 5:25 p.m. I walk up to your desk, looking visibly stressed. Hey, listen, I know you're packing up, but the VP just emailed, and I really need someone to review these financial projections with me before tomorrow. It'll only take an hour. Can you stay?
I'd love to help you out, but I can't tonight.
Oh, come on, please. You are so much better at catching spreadsheet errors than I am. I'm totally drowning here, and it's just an hour. We're supposed to be a team, right?
I really appreciate that you trust my analytical skills, but I'm not able to commit to that right now.
Seriously, so you're just going to walk out and leave me here to fail. If we don't catch these errors, the VP is going to be furious with both of us in the morning meeting. You're really going to throw me under the bus.
I understand this is a highly stressful situation for you, but I have other plans this evening. I will see you tomorrow morning.
Wow. Okay, stepping out of character for a second. That was actually intensely uncomfortable to be on the receiving end of.
I bet it was.
It felt like walking headfirst into a soft but incredibly solid concrete wall.
Let's analyze the mechanics of what just happened. Notice what I fundamentally refused to do. I didn't match your escalated emotional state.
You stay totally calm.
I didn't get defensive or angry. But more importantly, I didn't give you a single piece of ammunition to negotiate with. I didn't say, I can't because I have dinner reservations.
Because if you had,
You just said, cancel them. This is the VP.
you completely starved me of data. And you didn't apologize for your existence. That's the part that hit me the hardest.
The lack of apology is crucial.
When I laid on the guilt trip about throwing me under the bus, you didn't instinctively shrink and say, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I feel terrible. I'm the worst. You just calmly stated your reality.
It's called empathy without absorption. I acknowledged your stress. I understand this is a highly stressful situation for you, which validates your experience, but I did not absorb your crisis as my own responsibility.
That is the essence of a healthy boundary.
Yes. Your poor time management or unexpected crisis does not constitute an emergency for my nervous system.
It is so brilliantly contained. Now, the sources do mention one important caveat to all of this. Setting an ironclad boundary doesn't mean you are forced to be rigid or unhelpful if you genuinely want to assist.
That's an important distinction.
The text outlines that a polite no can also involve offering an alternative, but only if that alternative is healthy for you.
Context and capacity are everything. Let's return to our role-play scenario. Suppose I actually want to help you. I like you, I care about the project, but I am at my physical limit and I absolutely must go home to rest.
What do you do then?
I can offer an alternative that protects my boundary while still providing support. I might say, I'm not able to commit to staying late tonight, but if you send me the file, I can review it first thing tomorrow morning between 8 and 8:30 a.m.
I see. You are still executing a hard no to the immediate boundary-violating demand, which is sacrificing your evening rest.
Exactly.
But you are offering a structured solution that exists entirely within the confines of your own capacity.
Precisely. You dictate the terms of your generosity. But the overarching goal of all these techniques, whether you offer an alternative or just deliver a flat, polite refusal, is to eventually reach a psychological state where the refusal is genuinely guilt-free.
Guilt-free. That sounds like a dream.
The goal is to say no, walk to your car, and not spend the entire commute agonizing over whether your colleague hates you.
The goal is to realize that the sky doesn't fall just because you prioritized yourself.
The world will keep turning. The company will not collapse because you went home at 5:30.
This has been an incredibly profound deep dive. We have unpacked an immense amount of psychological real estate today.
We covered a lot of ground.
We really did. To synthesize everything we've explored in these sources, we started by looking at the harsh somatic reality of the people pleaser.
The physical toll it takes.
Right. We examined how deep evolutionary fears of isolation and conflict push us into fawning responses, leading us to bankrupt our own energy reserves. We looked at the compounding interest of that emotional debt, specifically the toxic, dual-directed nature of resentment.
We identified that being nice at the expense of your own survival is not a virtue. It is self-inflicted wound.
From there, we underwent a major paradigm shift. We dismantled the terrifying idea of boundaries as isolating brick walls and embraced the visualization of the garden fence.
Protecting the garden.
Yes. We explored the mathematical reality of our 100% daily energy battery. And we realized that saying a difficult no to an external demand is, in fact, saying a profound and necessary yes to our own well-being. It is the ultimate act of self-respect.
And finally, we translated that self-respect into actionable linguistic architecture.
The phrases.
Yes. We learned the raw power of brevity. We learned to say, I'd love to, but I can't, without offering the litany of excuses that secretly beg for permission and invite endless negotiation. We learned to tolerate the uncomfortable silence that follows a boundary.
As we prepare to close out this deep dive, the clinical source material leaves us with a concluding thought, a very practical healing directive, and I'd love for you to deliver that to the listener.
It is a vital reminder that retraining your nervous system is a gradual process. The text encourages you, listening right now, not to attempt a massive overnight overhaul of your personality.
You don't have to change everything today.
Exactly. You do not need to walk into work tomorrow and aggressively say no to your boss. Your invitation is simply to find just one opportunity today to practice what the researchers call a tiny no.
A tiny no.
Yes, a low-stakes refusal. It could be saying no to a telemarketer.
That's a good one.
It could be looking at a cashier who asks if you want to sign up for a store credit card and simply saying no thank you without explaining that you are trying to pay down debt.
Just no thank you.
Right. It could be saying no to checking your work email after 8 p.m. Practice that tiny no. Feel the physical sensation of vocalizing it. Tolerate the 2 seconds of awkwardness, and then register the quiet, powerful surge of self-respect that immediately follows it. You are building a new neural pathway.
You are laying the very first plank of wood for your garden vents. I absolutely love that.
It begins with one small act of autonomy.
Well, as you go out and practice building that fence today, I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to turn over in your mind.
It's here.
We've spent this entire time discussing the internal difficulty of setting a boundary. And it is true, when you finally start protecting your energy, when you stop being the endless source of accommodation, some people in your life are going to be surprised.
They won't be used to it.
Right. Some of them might even get angry. The boat is going to rock. But when you face that pushback, I want you to ask yourself one question. Are the people who are the most angry about your new boundaries simply the ones who are benefiting the absolute most from you not having any?